It's time now for an in-depth look at the market action on this Friday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Jun-sok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Dr. Yang, thanks for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
So Japan's new measures came into effect yesterday, restricting exports to Korea of key materials for semiconductors and displays. Of course, Korea is preparing to respond at the WTO. But as we just heard, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe saying a country can take action on trade when it affects national security. What do you say to that? Is this still not a violation of WTO rules?
Okay, it's unclear whether WTO will rule against Japan, and the reason is that technically Japan has not yet limited exports to Korea. What Japan has technically did is that these three chemicals that Japan has put off the whitelist for Korea. What they did is they made it more difficult. They made more difficult for Korea to import these items. They made, in order for Japan to export these items to Korea, in the past, Korea was given a 3-year permit to export as much of these chemicals as Korean firms needed. But now they have to go through paperwork for each purchase that the Korean companies make. And these come under the security provisions of the GATT agreement, which is part of the WTO agreements. And usually the WTO gives a lot of leeway to security exemption because they deal with national security. The whitelist is for limiting the spread of goods and technology which can be used to make weapons or advanced technology that can fall into wrong countries. It has usually been used to keep these dangerous goods from going into terrorist countries. So in a sense, Korea lost some special privileges that it used to have, but because many other countries do not have these privileges, what Korea lost is a special privilege rather than the right to import these goods themselves. Now, if Japan uses the whitelist, going off the whitelist to prohibit the exports of these items, then Korea can have a case. But so far, what Korea has to do is file the same paperwork as 170 other countries, so Korea does not have a clear case in the WTO.
Yeah, that could prove to be an important distinction there. Now, the Korean government doesn't want to get stuck like this again, so they've announced investments into high-tech materials so they can secure their own supplies. Korean people, meanwhile, are trying to organize boycotts of Japanese products and have even traveled to Japan as a kind of retaliation. What do you think Korea should do?
Okay, well, it's always good for Korea to invest in these products to get a multiple source, but we have to invest very carefully. And what I mean by that is there's a reason why Korea buys these items from Japan and why Japan is the only source for these chemicals. In this area of global supply chains, you find that certain goods are concentrated in certain countries. And the reason is they have the technology, they have the competitive advantage, so they can supply these items at top quality at low prices. And Korea right now cannot match the quality of these chemicals that Korean semiconductor companies need. Now, if Korea wants to develop these goods, have new companies develop these products in Korea, that's fine. But Korea has to realize that in order for these companies to invest in these chemicals, they have to be guaranteed demand for a long time. What I mean by that is if this trade conflict is over and Korean companies go back to buying from Japan, then these new companies will be left out in the cold. So you have to guarantee that these new companies would have a steady demand for a long time, and that might be difficult for Korea to arrange.
Right. Well, there's concern that the Japanese government won't stop here. They say they're taking Korea off of Japan's whitelist, as you mentioned, that enables the easier exporting. But Korea and Japan are highly intertwined economically. In that regard, how much do they both stand to lose if this goes on?
Well, semiconductor exports just by itself is about 8 to 9% of Korean GDP. That doesn't account for semiconductors used within Korea. So semiconductors is probably the largest single item that Korea produces. So it'll be a major problem for Korea if semiconductor production slows down. But the global supply chain that I mentioned before also works in a way for Korea, because Korea is a major source for memory, DRAMs, displays that the Japanese need, Japanese companies like Sony need. So if if Japan do not sell these three types of chemicals to Korea, and Korea cannot make these semiconductors and displays, then that again will affect Japanese companies as well. But we'll have to see whether going on the whitelist is not quite the same as an export ban. So if Japan does require more paperwork, but they still export these chemicals, then Korean semiconductor firms, well, they might have some raised costs, but it might not have a major impact on semiconductor production. So we'll have to see how Japanese government processes Korean requests for these chemicals.
Indeed. All right, Dr. Young, thanks so much for coming on today. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.